I'm Nigel Newlove in Ottawa. Today, the United Nations says it's alarmed that Canada continues to discriminate against Indigenous children. The UN released a report accusing the Canadian government of stalling on bringing equity to First Nations child welfare.
This is my grade 1 picture, and I think this was a time when I actually found out that I was adopted.
Dwayne Morris O'Beck was taken at birth. He's the 60 scoop survivor. During the 1960s, government scooped up thousands of Indigenous children and placed them in non-Indigenous families.
And so we weren't raised with our culture and our language, and so that set a trajectory for a lot of self-harm.
Now, 57 years later, the United Nations says Canada is still refusing to provide equity to Indigenous children.
The word that struck out to me was them using the word alarming in the context of Canada.
Unlike other Canadians, First Nations child welfare services and funding are administered by the federal government. In 2007, Cindy Blackstock and the Assembly of First Nations filed a complaint with the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal accusing the federal government of underfunding First Nations child welfare. In January 2016, they won. But despite 3 non-compliance orders, the tribunal and United Nations says the federal government is not providing equity.
You can make symbolic statements, they don't cost you anything. But what really counts is how you're changing people's lives on the ground, and particularly children's lives.
I always dreamt that I would jump on that motorbike and take off.
Morris O'Beck still wonders what life would have been like if he had been raised among his people. He wants to see an Indigenous-led approach on child welfare.
They really need to indigenize it and move towards a more Indigenous process and family-orientated process, as opposed to removing the child from the family, but trying to keep the family together is the most important part.
The United Nations criticism comes as the government changed the face of Indigenous affairs. Today, the Prime Minister announced during a cabinet shuffle that responsibilities will be split to 2 ministers, Carolyn Bennett becoming the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, and Jane Philpott becoming Minister of Indigenous Services. Despite the newfound attention, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau sidestepped a question about the criticism today at a press conference. Cindy Blackstock says she's going to continue to pursue legal avenues to find the federal government in contempt of court, a move that could put the Liberals' reconciliation efforts in jeopardy. In Ottawa, I'm Nigel Newlove, City News.